And what is CSS Grid essentially? So it's just a tool that helps us to efficiently control our layouts. But this time it helps us to, it's more powerful than Flexbox. It's more flexible than Flexbox. But with CSS Grid, you can do more advanced things that you can't do with Flexbox. And we're going to be learning it in this tutorial. So first thing, I just have a H1 of CSS Grid. So let's get, so you know what we're going to do? We're just going to have a box, a container. Because we have to have a grid container, right? That is elemental. Container. Then inside here, we're going to have box. Then dot box 1. So we're going to have a box and box 1. We're going to have a H1 box 1. Then we're going to duplicate this about 6 times, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's change it so we know which box is which. Box 2, box 2, box 3, box 3, box 4, box 5, 4, and 5, 6, and 6. So let's see how this looks in the HTML. Save. So it's just, we have 6 boxes over there. So let's style it in CSS. I'm just going to attach a link to column CSS. That's going to link up my CSS. So this is like the curriculum for this project. First of all, what do you want to do? You want to start by styling the boxes. And the boxes, let's give them a background color of about 222. Save that. We have that dark color. Let's give it a color of white. And a padding of about 20 pixels. Okay, now so we have 6 big boxes there. So we want to put them in a grid. So normally in the first, we watch my first video on Flexbox. Maybe if you don't know Flexbox, please you should go and watch that video. So container display of flex. So if I were to give it a display of flex now, it will be flex. I know as CSS Grid, it's gonna be in 6 columns. Okay, but yeah, it's gonna be in 6, right? In this space, we're gonna give it a display of grid, and that doesn't do anything by default. Manually, Flexbox already defined those 6 rows or 6 columns for us, but we have to define them ourselves with CSS Grid. So grid template columns, and we can define the width of our columns. So for example, 200 pixels, 200 pixels, and 200 pixels, which is 3 columns. So it's going to create a column with 200 pixels, 200 pixels, and 200 pixels. But why these 3 is going to be pushed on to the next row, 200 pixels, 200 pixels, and 200 pixels. You can also add another row. Why the one that could not fit will go to the end, 200 pixels, 200. But that is all cool. But we can also add with different values as well. So we can have about 500 pixels, 200 pixels, and 100 pixels. As you can see, that's a bit messed up. And we can also add okay, instead of 500 pixels, let me make this 300 pixels so that, because okay, this one is 300 pixels, while this guy is 200 pixels, and so might not be able to properly see it because there's no spacing right now. So to do that, we'll come to the spacing later. But let's just, for now, let's just give it something that we should never do. Margin of 10 pixels. Okay, now we can see that the way this one is 300 pixels, 200 pixels, and while this last column here is 100 pixels. And that is it for it, for different values. You can also give it with percentages. And so grid template columns, you can say 20%. You can say, okay, let's give them equal number, 33%, 33%, 33%. Save. So that is about 99%, I think. So that equal columns. So normally I said why you should not give it a margin of 10 pixels. So let's inspect and let's know why we should not give it a margin. So if we inspect, you can see that it has margin all over everywhere, even at the top, at the side, and some other unwanted places where we might not want margin. We can even have this. We even have the CSS Grid Inspector to that we can use to inspect our grid, but that will come on later, and I'll show you how to use that. So instead of doing this, let's just give it a grid gap. So to give it gap with CSS Grid, what we just have to do, say grid gap 10 pixels. So that does not give it margin in unwanted places. It only gives it margin or spacing between the element. Okay. Right. So the next thing that we can also give this with fractions, just so you know. I'm just exploring different types of units we can use this with fractions. Same thing. So fractions are just one fraction on screen, one fraction on screen, one fraction on screen. I don't really use fraction as a CSS unit like that. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the repeat function. So yes, this is good. We can create columns, but this is not a very efficient way of creating columns with the same size. So to efficiently do this, what we just have to do is say grid template columns. We can do the repeat function. So this function allows us to pass in, allows us to repeat columns. So we can pass in 3, 1, and 4. So as you can see, that does the same thing. So just what this is telling us is that we want 3 times 1 FR. So this is the same thing as this. This is what it's doing behind the hood, but it's just a cleaner and more efficient way of writing this type of code. The next thing I'm going to talk about is rows. So as you can see, when this is a colon, 1, 2, 3, but because this other 3 could not fit here, it made another row. This is the default behavior of CSS Grid, and this row height, we can control the rows. So let's talk about this now. So first of all, I'm going to make a repeat of 2, just so that we have more rows. The rows are just the one going vertical like this, while columns are the one going horizontal like this. So you can say grid template rows. Same thing, we can pass in 200 pixels, 200 pixels, 200 pixels. But oh yeah, 200 pixels, 200 pixels, 300 pixels, because we have 3 rows and we have 2 columns. Save. So that makes each row 200 pixels in height. From here to here, 200 pixels. Why from here to here, 200 pixels? We can even add an extra one of 200 pixels. As you can see, it's already created a space for that, but there's nothing there in a minute. And these can also be different values. It doesn't have to be the same. 400 pixels. So this one is now exceptionally 400 pixels long. But you can even make it 0 pixels, which will immediately cut off the content there. Just as we have seen in our later videos, we can also use the repeat function. But before I use the repeat function, there's one more thing I want to talk about that often confuses people, and that's the min max function. So I'm just to better explain this, I'm just gonna have a lorem of like 20 pixels. Lorem 20, save. No, let's duplicate this. Copy. Oh no, it should be enough. So lorem, I've given a lorem of 20 pixels. So I want to say grid template column 100 pixels. In fact, we can even use the repeat function. So repeat 3, 100 pixels, right? So that makes it 100 pixels and it cuts off the content. So we have content there and we want to show it. So that is not efficient at all. So we can use the min max function here. The minimum is gonna be 100 pixels and the maximum could be 200 pixels. Save, and it's gonna expand when it needs to. When it finds out that its content is gonna expand to 200 pixels. But okay, let's remove this because it's going to expand to 200. Our gap was normal. It's going to expand to 200 pixels when needed, but we can just put this at auto and to expand automatically when it finds out that there's content in that row. So that is it for the minimize function. It just specifies a minimum and a maximum. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, I've already talked about grid gap. So let's talk about one of the finances that we're going to talk about is the grid lines. So let's come back to the developer tools where we're inspecting our elements. So if you look at it, they are called something called grid lines. So I'm just going to dog this into another window. There's something called grid lines, and these are imaginary lines that dictate how we can control and manipulate our grid. As you can see, when we create a grid template columns of 2, there are actually 3 grid lines. So when you create X amount of columns, there are X plus 1 amount of grid lines. Observe, same thing with rows. X amount of rows, X plus 1 amount of row lines. So as you can see, we have one line here from the starting, and this guy ends at grid line 2, while this guy starts from grid line 2 and ends at grid line 3, but we created 2 columns. Same thing here, grid row 1 ends at grid row 2, grid from grid row 2 to grid row 3, from grid row 3 to grid row 4. So that is essentially how grid lines work. So we can use this to as in position elements anyhow we want entirely on the grid. This is essentially what makes CSS Grid so powerful. I'm gonna show you. So let's make something crazy out of it. So first of all, I'm gonna create about 4 columns. So let's make them 200 pixels in width. 4. Save. You can see it now. So I want box 1 to take up from grid row line 1 to grid row line 4 or 5 because we created 4, so they ought to be 5. So let's make it like that. So I'm going to reduce the Visual Studio Code window. See, as you see, there are 5. So the way we do that, so box dash 1, I'm going to say grid colon start at 1, grid colon end at 4, no, rather 5. Okay, let's check if it has that class of box 1. Okay, it's not box dash 1, it's just box 1. So as you can see, it takes off from grid line 1 to grid line 5. So what I want to do, you can also control columns as well. So we want box 2 is perfectly like where I need it to be, or we can even expand this up to 300 pixels. So each column now is now 300 pixels long, which makes everything a little bit too long. So let's make it 250 pixels. Can't see quite see the end. 220. Okay, that's better. So I want box 3 to start from column 3. And by the way, we have 3 rows, so let's expand that a little bit and make them 4 rows. I want box 3 to start at row line 3. So let's do that. So box 3, grid rows start. So it's going to start at 3. So it just starts at 3. We can also specify an end value, but automatic is going to span 1 column. So you see the same thing as saying grid rows end 4, because that's default behavior. So what I do want to do, I want box 4 to now span from here, from grid row 2 to grid row 4, and also span from grid column 2 to grid column 4, as you can see, and also span from grid row 2 to grid row 4. Just wanted to make that explicitly as clear as possible. So box 4 grid row. First of all, let's start with column. So there's an easy and efficient way of writing this, which I'm going to show you right now. So we just take grid colon and we pass in where we want to start from. So from 2 to 4, as you can see here, from 2 to 4. And this, we just put this type of backslash in between from 2 to 4. To save that, now it's going to start from 2 to 4. We also want it to span 2 rows in it. So from row 2, pass row 3 to row 4. So we say grid row 2 to 4. Not 5, sorry, to 4. That's nice. Essentially, that's nice. So what we still have space in the grid. So we still have so much space in the grid that I might even consider adding some few more boxes. As you can see, we have a lot of empty space. So I'm just going to call this box 7. Box 7. So we can see that I don't think we could ever do this with Flexbox. If we could do this with Flexbox, it's going to be incredibly difficult. So save. As you can see, we have two two extra boxes. So I'm going to toggle that stuff back on so we can see it properly. Okay, now we can see that properly. So box 5 and box 6 is perfectly where I want them to be. So box 7, I want it to span 2 columns in width. So as you can see, it's already starting at grid column 1. Let's start it to grid column 3. So grid column 1 to 3. And box 8 is going to take the remaining space. So box 8, grid colon 3 to 5. Okay, that's it with CSS Grid. So this is what we have managed to make with CSS Grid. This is how powerful grid lines can be, because they allow you to position things in the grid like anyhow. This is how powerful. This is what we have essentially made, this type of layout with CSS Grid.